Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. But thanks for taking the time for this, and I want to know more about you're coming from Basel. How was that? How was that experience? And obviously I feel like you're a veteran of Basel. You've been many times. Like, how do you feel about, what you've been, yeah, what you've been experiencing there?
Well, I've been 3 times, and last year I did a performance. Uh, so that was my first time performing, like doing a performance piece. And
Hmm.
then here we came back kind of knowing more like what to expect. And so this is also my first time showing in any of the art fairs. So I showed it Untitled. So that was amazing because it was, always a
Hmm.
dream to be at one of the fairs. So every year it keeps, leveling up. And showing at Untitled, it really was so special. I mean, the fairs itself are amazing. You walk in and you see it's like a candy store of art, and your brain is on fire seeing everything. It's hard to take in. And then for your own work to be in there is mind blowing. It's really something. And people walk up and they're looking and they're talking about it, and it's interesting, and they're taking photos, and it was really special. But then the performance was outside of Art Basel and in between of Miami, or Design Miami. So it was in the same place we did last year. The performance was we took a giant cage, like dog cage, like I sat in a dog cage, and I was like we made a makeshift bathroom kind of. So there's a TikTok trend where there's like NPCs where people perform actions based on what gift they receive in the comments. So we basically built something similar, my studio assistant and I, where it was every button had an action. So one button said cut your hair, one button said, you know, brush your hair. One button said lipstick. And so audience members could click a button. And whenever they would click, I, sitting in the cage, would like do the action. So at first people were really nervous, and then some people would just go crazy on the buttons. They were like, bow, 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 bow. And of course it was like cut your hair that got really people enticed, into it. And by the end, though, the police came and they took one of my tapestries that was there because I make tapestries, and they put it over the cage. And they were like, show's over. And then the audience was like fighting the police, trying to get them to leave us alone. But eventually they shut us down. And it was more like police directly involved with us this time. They were like very serious about getting involved. I mean, I was in a cage, but they like, covered it with a blanket. They covered like I was in it, so they were like covering me essentially with like blankets. It was very bizarre. And the whole project was about advocating for more public restrooms. So the idea of being forced to do these things in public. Because growing up in LA and then, I've only lived my life in cities. So public restrooms are super important, especially in the queer community, and also anybody who's just having any like differently abled people, or honestly, houselessness, but also restrooms in general. Like, anybody's, you live in New York, you know exactly what I mean. You probably deal with it all the time. Yeah.
I do. I do. I was actually thinking about that. I was about to jump in and be like, ever try and like, take a whiz in Union Square or something when you like, and like Starbucks or like every other
Yeah.
spot like won't let you do that anymore because there's so much, you know what I mean? Like, especially when it's winter and it's cold, like all the tourists like literally go to Starbucks just to take a whiz and, get out before like without even ordering, and Starbucks is mad about that. So it's like, yeah, it's a very relevant topic.
There was, in Astor Place, there was that Starbucks
Mm.
and it shut down. And everyone was like, I saw a million memes that were like, the public restroom in Astor Place has been shut down, because that's literally what it is. I mean, it's so wrapped up in, you know, the corporations that have, restrooms, because that's unfortunately like our only option for a lot of people. So
Mhm.
exactly. There are like a lot of initiatives about building more public restrooms, but we ended up making some pieces with the project that were small, tiny bathrooms with like a 3D printed like sculpture. They were all sculptural works, and I was like doing intimate things in all of them, like being on my laptop, or talking on the phone, or cutting my hair. So similar actions. Uh, but we are selling them, and we're just donating the money to like houselessness organizations because that seems more pressing than maybe what that money could do to an organization that's because it was in Miami, so we wanted to donate something directly to a Miami organization. Than maybe something that focuses on bathrooms specifically, because that just feels like more direct action.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. It's such something that every day, it's something that I think a lot of us have to face. And
Yeah.
I think that it's not so glamorous to talk about. So that's what the project was trying to elevate.
Yeah, I love that. And how do you come up with your ideas and like your process and all that like for integrating it's a that's why I was saying like you have like an innovative approach to everything because obviously like and we'll talk about this too like you're a digital like communicator, you know what I mean? Like whereas like art has usually been always kind of associated to like the tangible, like the museums and the the offline, version. So like you have this new approach to not only showing, but like educating about art and all that type of thing. So how do you think creatively? You know what I mean? How do you come up with things? Like what inspires you? How do you like every day kind of, get your juices going and think about initiatives like this, for example?
Well, I think I had it, I had the dreams in my heart, but I did not have the way to do it and do it in a way that could translate both between the art world and the within social media, and like the viral space was something really important. And I think both of those spaces like need to be studied to be truly understood. So I went and I got my master's in fine arts, and that's how I like really learned to speak the language of like the art world. And then for like the viral space, it was something that was just like a creep. I just like really studied it, like internet history, like what was viral especially at the time that I did the Craziest Thing series. Like I like, which was like about like maybe uh maybe within the last like 2 years, yeah, or maybe a year ago, year and a half. Like that was like something like super studied. So I feel like these things like they just most things are built on repetition. So there's so many amazing performance artists that have come before me, and like there's amazing content creators that have come before me. And so most things are built on repetition, then you add your own sauce. So I think big ideas are so easy to do. Like they really are just easy to complete, and you just sometimes need the support of those that have come before you. And that can all happen by studying, which you don't need a degree to do. But for me, it was a great option to, especially for the art world. There's a lot of like words and things I just wasn't exposed to. So for me, it was helpful. But that's only because I wanted to do it within such an academic context. But I think studying anything is the first way for me to go if I'm interested in something. Yeah.
What have you found like this it's interesting. I wasn't expecting that in terms of like a lot of creators like go viral. Obviously there are formulas and there are like backgrounds in terms of how to do things and all that. But especially we deal with a lot of musicians, we feature a lot of musicians, and a lot
Yeah.
of these guys go viral kind of by accident, you know what I mean? Like because like maybe the song like resonates with like certain groups or like certain people and blah blah blah, and like they just go viral and it just kind of becomes a thing. But you having like studied it, what have you found like on the internet, like sto the story of the history of the internet and like especially these days with the digital evolution and all that, like things must have changed like
Oh yeah.
so quickly. Like how have you what have you found like studying this type of stuff?
I mean, the people who have made a big impact on internet history are always disruptors, right? People that have always like disrupted the way that it's been consumed. So my like favorite example of this is like Lonely Girl 15, which was in like 2006 or 2008. And so she, yeah, like I feel like you probably are, I mean, it wasn't somebody I was super familiar with, but it's like then I like did a deep dive later, and it's like essentially she was one of the first people to kind of have a production team behind her, but pretend it was like a vlog. And so that really just had disruption on the internet. So I think at a time when there's a lot of makeup tutorials going on to then like disrupt it and have something like printed out in an illusion, like that's like a disruption. So I think like to be paying attention to trends and then like offer disruption. Like I think a great example of that is uh the series that was who the fuck did I marry? That's a great example of like a disruption in the digital space, right? It was so long form at a time when things were so short form, and now everything is becoming long form again. So the biggest thing is just to really paying attention and then figure out what's disruptive, but really knowing the space. And I think that was an example of something truly organic. But I think it's also I just also find it super interesting. It's something I really like love and am passionate about because it's the way we communicate, right, in the digital space. And I think as an artist, we're essentially like communicators for the world. And this is the medium that I'm like choosing, performance. And I really think performance can exist digitally as well. And so, in the same way that I study, like, oh, yeah, I study these like artists that are so great of the times, like Paul McCarthy or, all these artists that I love, I'm also studying Lonely Girl 15 and how that impacted and how I can like apply that. Because it really is like disrupting is the way to, you know, find even artists, right, that you've interviewed that are music artists. They've probably been a disruptor in some way or another.
Yeah, yeah, and that's usually like the way to innovate, you know. It's like it's always like going against the current, you know, against the wind, you know, and gonna like creating new things come from like usually mistakes or missteps or stuff
Yep.
that is just not usually, you know, the norm. So yeah, I agree with you on that. But what are some of the artists that influenced you when you were a kid or like when you were growing up artistically and all that? Not just, you know, visual artists or painters or whatever. Like, what were you consuming when you started like, you know, realizing that you had like some creative buzz, you know, within you? Like, what was the, you know, what were the
Yeah, like
sparks there?
content wise, like content.
Content, whatever, anything that you were
Oh, yeah.
exposed to, you know, like
Honestly, one of my earliest favorite things was comics from my older sister, and she had all of the creator. I think his name is pronounced like Jonan Vasquez, but like he wrote all of the things for he drew and wrote all of the Invader Zim comics. It's like super old school, like really
mm,
old. I love all of those. And so like I don't know, comics, drawing, things like that. Of course, like anime, and then obviously like YouTube. I was so inspired by like the YouTube content creators of the earlier generation. Like I saw like the early storytellers of the time. I was just old enough to see the end of Lonely Girl 15, but then I saw like the rise of so many other greats, So I don't know. I think I'm just really inspired by the storytelling, that is available online,
yeah.
as well as, and then throughout like I don't know, the comic space is also something I'm really interested in. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a resurgence of that. When I was growing up, I mean, I'm 33 years old. When I was growing up, comics and like comic books, the anime and all that type of thing was considered like nerdy. Like, you know, it
Yeah.
was like a very like insular thing. Like it wasn't a thing, you know. Whereas these days, everybody, even like people my age, have rediscovered that type of medium and you know like it became extremely mainstream and popular like kind of shows you also like the kind of you know cyclical nature of you know art and all that type of thing
Without
um yeah how do you I think one thing that I was interested in knowing more is how do you interact with your audience online like what kind of stuff do you get from people like because TikTok and especially TikTok is very direct like people are like not even afraid to be, you know, disruptive if you want to keep it, you know, keep that trend. But what kind of, you know, what kind of comments and what kind of interaction do you have with your audience? And like both positive and negative, you know, like what's the relationship there, you know, with your followers and viewers and stuff?
I think on the videos that I do illusions, like printout videos, people love to gamify it. They're very exciting. They also really are like passionate about the rules of the game that I did not create, but they kind of created for me. So if I don't follow the rules, like if something's too hidden or if it's too easy, I definitely get like dragged for that. Um, I also get like a lot of really for performance work is always going to be really divisive. So people either love it or hate it, and there's no like in between. People love it or hate it, period. And I feel like in general, I get really divisive comments, a lot of love, a lot of diehard community following. The queer community has a lot of love for me, period, as it happens. We all love each other. But sometimes I get really like homophobic, transphobic comments and that's like always shocking. I'm like, what the F? It's like bro, it's 2024. So that's always annoying. But other than that, I mean, to be honest, I kind of don't read comments after a certain amount of time.
Mhm.
That's just what happens. You just can't keep track of all of it. And also, like, I try to respond to the first few, but then after, a certain amount of time, it just you can't respond to all of it.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to keep track too. Like if you want to keep sane, if you want to keep, doing your thing and, creating, it's hard to like keep, especially when you have like so many and like when you've got like such a big following. Um, but I think like just a couple more things I was curious about. When it comes to brands and collaborations and partnerships, how do you how do you leverage that type of like you've collaborated with like so many different art the big brands and all that type of thing. How do you approach something like that? Because it can be tough and it can be like hard to, pick the right brands, the brands that like, align with your messaging and with your goals and all that type of thing. How do you approach like big collaborations like that? Like do you usually have some kind of like like standards or some kind of like guidelines that you want to, like enforce creatively? Like how do you approach something like that?
Yeah, I feel like it's always usually really collaborative. We like, of course, I only move forward on things that I feel really like it could be a not only is it something I, of course, already use and love, but it's something that I feel like there's like an integrity there, like something
Mm.
that I feel like would be more, I don't know. I think in the early days I would be more keen to like try to make something work that might not totally feel as organic, maybe. But now it's kind of like, could I do a really good video for this? Could I really integrate this into like this gamified universe I've created? And if not, I don't know. My manager is also, I would say Vic is she's more than a manager. She's a collaborator in this process. She really is. And when it comes to brand stuff, she's the number one advocate for keeping it very um collaborative and organic. She really is. She's great at navigating that. So I have to give her full credit for why when I post ads, it's not like cringy. That it give it up for Victoria Daniel, for real.
Nice. Yeah, and these like the reason I asked is because these days it's with ads and like brand partnerships and all that, like everything has to be like people, users and even like consumers are very attached to what they buy. They want an emotional attachment
Yeah.
to what they're, consuming. So, like the people that brands choose to be on their side, like has to be also approved by their consumers. Like there's a hard line there. I think that wasn't there in the past in terms of how consumers feel about, collaborations and stuff like that. Um, so I would say let's close with what are you working on in terms of 2025? How do you like, and this is like more a broader question on how do you plan on evolving artistically? Like what are you working on? What are some things that you would love to, as a disruptive artist, keep disrupting? Like what are some things that you have in the works on your mind that's coming up for you that's like the new frontier for your creations?
I think I strangely enough would oh my gosh, sorry. I'm like, am I about to sneeze? No, I'm not. I think in well from visual arts, I have a show coming up in January in Knoxville, more tapestries. And oh, ask last. Oh, that's Miss Kendall, AI in the chat. Okay.
No, I talked to her before. I thought it was like a real person.
Oh no, I like it. But I have a show coming up in Knoxville, which I'm showing tapestries at, and then I have a show coming up later in the year that I'm collaborating with one of my most favorite people in the world, my favorite painter ever, which is very exciting, Joaquin Stasi Kaye, who is like amazing. And we're showing a show that's all corners, all work that's based in the corners. So that's a new body of work. And that's going to be curated by like Leslie Fram and it's gonna be amazing. And then uh that'll really push the boundaries of what I can do in a gallery space because I just never have done anything like that. In terms of performance, you'll just have to wait and see. But online, honestly, as I feel like this is almost reductive because it's so non-disruptor, but I feel like most of my online presence has been so much about providing disruptive space and like being this kind of character online or doing this, but I'd actually like to shift to providing more personal content online. I think a lot of the audience has been so like loyal and following, and I think they have a lot of questions, and I have had a lot of interesting experiences recently. I'd like to provide more of the personal. Like I get a lot of questions about things, about like personal things, and I wouldn't mind providing more of that. So maybe this is the chapter in which I provide more of the personal, because I think that in some ways, I think I forget the way that maybe I live, maybe my existence as like a queer person is motivating for some. I don't know. I'm deaf, I'm queer. It's exciting for a lot of people. So I'm gonna definitely share more of that because I think it is motivating for the younger gen to see that type of representation.
Cool. Well, then, since you mentioned this, just one quick flash last minute. What do you think? What would you want, your audience to feel and to take away from your work generally? Like
Hmm.
what's the main thing that you'd want them to take away in terms of like it could be like, do you want them to be like feeling a certain way? Do you want them to be like
Hmm.
acting a certain way when like like what's your ultimate goal, like for your audience? Like
Yeah.
would
I mean, with all my work, and that includes like the tapestries, the you know, my videos, and also I don't know, I think everything I do, I really want to, this has always been my goal, is to make other people feel heard. No pun intended. No, but like I do. I want to make people feel heard. I really do. I want to make people feel like they're maybe they're seeing parts, the less glamorous parts highlighted. I do a lot of work about my grandmother, her passing, you know what I mean? Caretaking. Uh, I want to advocate for those that may not have accessibility in certain spaces. And I think that some basic things just need to be spoken about. So I'd love to use my platform for those type of things. So I think providing that space, but I do receive a lot of messages about queer identity and about hearing loss and how people are really inspired. So usually I wear hearing aids that are like really decorated and people are really moved by that. And I didn't realize that would have such an impact. Or even with my relationship with my partner, people really love seeing that relationship. And there's a lot in representation, more than I give it credit for. And I think that I'd like to share more and I want to make others feel, I mean, this is a word that I think can almost feel borderline corny, but empowered to feel like they can be themselves and just not have to hide, for example, like their accessibility needs, you know?